Hi guys, it's Beth. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing working on some really fun projects and I'm super excited about. They've actually been some things that I've wanted to do for a while and I'm finally just decided to go ahead and do them. And they are going to be some trash to treasure projects. And if you saw my kind of channel update for 2021, I talked about my crafty goals, and one of those goals is to do at least one kind of like trash to treasure or upcycle project every month. And the projects that those type of projects that I'm doing will still involve like using pattern paper or paper craft products in some way. There's probably other ones that I will do, on my own that may just require painting or twine or something, but the ones that I am using paper on, I will be sure to share with you so that you can see what all you can be doing with paper. So the two projects that I'm going to tackle now are some things that I wanted to get out for my winter decor before it's time to take down my winter decor and put up Valentine's. I found this little sled at Goodwill, like last year or the year before. It says $2.99, so I either paid $2.99 or I may have paid $1.50 if it was the color of the week. And when I bought it, I knew that I wanted to buy it to change it. I, didn't really love the snowman image that was on here, and so I figured I could paint it and do something else with it. So I finally figured out what I did want to do with it, and I'm going to paint the runners and the frame white. Actually, I'll probably do a coat of white paint all over, at least one coat over everything. And then the runners, I think I'll leave white. And then this top part, I want to use some of this Woodgrain Paper. And I haven't decided yet if I want to use like the bright white or if I want to use more of this like rustic white. I'm kind of see how I feel about them once I get it painted up. And then I do want to do a little distressing, and then I'm trying to decide if I want to add like a winter phrase maybe on the sled, or maybe just a, like some sprigs and a bow or something at the top. I haven't gotten that far yet. I kind of want to see what it looks like once I get it painted and get the paper on it, and kind of play that by ear. But this is the first project I have. And then the other thing we've actually had it for a while, but it was either a Goodwill find or a garage sale find. And it's a little stool, and it's not like overly stable for someone to step on it. Like my daughters tried to use it when they were younger to brush their teeth or something, and it kind of wobbled a little bit. So yes, that could have been fixed, but we did have some more stable stools that we ended up using for them. So I decided that I was just going to turn this more into a decor piece than an actual functional stool. So again, I don't remember where I got this, but it was secondhand. And for this one, again, I'm going to paint it white and distress it. And on the top of this one, I'm going to add some buffalo check. Because if you followed my channel for a while, you know that I love plaid, I love buffalo check, and painting buffalo check has been really popular the past few years, but I don't have the patience for, and I guess that's not even really detailed painting, but I don't have the patience for painting that's even that detailed, especially when I have patterned paper in like millions of patterns that I could use. So what I am going to do, this is just big enough, the 12-inch size pattern paper is just big enough to cover the width of the top of the stool. So that's what I'm going to do to add some pattern to the stool. But I will say the first thing I did was I kind of went through with a wet rag and wiped everything down. This has been around for a while, in our house, so I'm sure it had picked up some dust. And then this was dusty just from sitting kind of in a pile in my craft room. So the next thing I need to do is get rid of these stickers that are on the back. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut the twine off. The hanger here, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off completely. If I want to add twine back to it, I have twine in my stash, or I can even repurpose this one and add that back on. So the stickers are off, and at least they came off pretty easy. And so next will be and I'm going to show you the paint that I'm going to be using. I was gifted a set of acrylic paint from the Hippie Crafter, and this set has 20 different colors in it, and it ranges, you know, from neutrals to bright colors. And I've been itching to try this out, but like I said, I haven't had a ton of time to work on like these types of DIY projects, and so I haven't gotten to play with them yet. So today I'm going to be using to paint these projects, I'm going to be using the titanium white. And then I haven't decided when I go to distress if I want to use, there's a black, and then there's like a raw umber. I'll probably end up using the black or maybe a little bit of both. I don't know. We'll kind of, again, play that by ear. But these are the paints that I am going to be using. Or this is really the main paint that I'm going to be using is the white. But I did want to talk about the Hippie Crafter. They actually sent me several things to try out, so I'm excited to be able to play with some of the other items as well. But these are ultra pigmented paint, and they are rated for indoor and outdoor use, and they are professional artist grade and water based. And so I will leave a link below to the Hippie Crafter and this particular paint set that I am using if you guys are interested in that. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get this party started. So I am just taking my white paint and pouring it into a plastic bowl and using a regular foam brush for this. And I ended up adding one coat to the top of the sled just because it is going to get covered, but I did want to make sure in case I cut my paper short in the end that, you know, the top was white as well. And then most of the rest of the sled, I ended up doing like 3 coats. I think I maybe only did 2 on the very back of the sled that I figured nobody was going to see. So I finished painting it off camera. And now I am just going to apply my paper, and I decided to go with more of that white paper just because I liked it better with the white on the sled. And really simple, I'm just taking a pencil, I turned the sled and the paper over, and I'm just tracing the top of the sled onto the back of my paper and then cutting it out. Luckily, it's a really simple shape and an easy cut. And I tend to cut on the outside of my pencil lines just because I would rather have too much left on top than not enough. So that's just my one little tip for today. So now I'm bringing in my Mod Podge, and I am going to glue on the paper to the top of my sled. So I did put a coat of Mod Podge on the top of the sled and a coat of Mod Podge onto the back of the paper. And I will be showing you the Mod Podge when I am working on the stool so that you can see exactly what type of Mod Podge I'm working with. And here I'm just smoothing it down, making sure I get all the bubbles out. And I always start smoothing from the center out and then kind of go back through and work on the edges or wherever I might need to add a little more pressure. And I'm just using, it's like a little kind of hard plastic squeegee. You could use a credit card or the scraper from your stoneware maybe. I think that might work too. And then I'm applying another coat of Mod Podge over the top to seal it. So here I'm doing my distressing, and I just took some of the black paint from the paint set, and I just have a makeup sponge from the Dollar Tree, and it's kind of like a dry brush technique. You could do this with a small paintbrush too, but on a project this size, I just felt I'd have more control with the makeup sponge. And I just put a little bit of the paint onto, it's actually the backing of some vinyl that I had used. And I like dab my sponge in the paint and then dab it off like elsewhere onto that backing. And then just kind of lightly dab it or slide it across the parts that I want distressed on the sled. So the parts that I'm distressing are things that would like naturally get distressed, like the edges of the top part of the sled, the rungs, the runners, especially the fronts of the runners, or like the back ends. And then sometimes I kind of wipe off a little bit, and then sometimes I just went back and added more depending on what I thought it needed. So I did decide to go with a saying on the front of my sled. So I used my silhouette to cut out this Let It Snow out of black Oracal 650 vinyl, 651 vinyl. And this is just a image that I had purchased through the Silhouette Design Studio, and I kind of rearranged it just a little bit to fit my sled and then sized it. It's about 5 by 7, and I just put it on some transfer tape and am putting it onto my sled. So if you go back, I did put a light coat of Mod Podge on before I put my vinyl on, and that was just so that whenever I took that transfer tape off, it would hopefully not pull off any of the paper. And then I will come in with 2 more coats of Mod Podge on top of the vinyl. So I do 1 coat with you here, and then I do another coat off screen. So while that's drying, I am pulling out some black and white plaid ribbon from my stash because I decided to do both of the things I mentioned at the front of the video. And I'm adding a bow and, the saying on the front. And I am not a bow maker. I have not made many bows. I am not that great at it yet. So this is just a super simple bow. I just made some loops and tied it off with some twine. And then this is kind of like a cheater bow. I'm going to take some more of my ribbon to wrap it around the center there. And one thing I discovered, I hadn't used this ribbon yet before now, and I realized it's actually stretchy. It's almost like elastic. It's not quite seam binding feel. It feels a little bit more just like elastic ribbon for some reason. So that made it a little difficult, but it was the ribbon that I liked the best and really wanted to use, so I was trying to make it work. And once I get my center wrapped, I am going to come in and cut some more ribbon to make the tails. And I probably should have attached this before I put on, there's probably a better way I could have done this, but I was just kind of winging it at this point. And so I do cut another length of ribbon. Trying to figure out how long, like where I want to put my bow and how long I want my tails to be. And then I just kind of fold it over so that the plaid is showing, that the front of the ribbon is up. And then I do angle cut the ends there, and then I'm just going to hot glue this to the back of my bow. So like I said, it's kind of a cheater bow. It's not all one piece by any means. So I am going to play with that a little bit more off screen, and I'm going to move on to the next step for my actual sled. So I pull out my Minwax polyacrylic, and it is the matte clear. And this just adds extra protection for the vinyl and the paper. The Mod Podge does a really good job of sealing it, but the Mod Podge can get a little tacky, so the polyacrylic kind of fights that. It kind of gives it an extra coat. Okay, so off screen, I did end up redoing the tails of my bow because I wanted them longer. And so I ended up I pulled off the tails that I had put on before and then cut some longer strips. And then I found a snowflake in my stash that I thought would look cute in the center of my bow. And that is my sled. I'm really happy how this one turned out. It was actually better than I thought it would look. And then this is kind of where it lives right now in my living room. It sits inside a little snowman box full of some greenery and pine cones. So super fun, and I'm super happy with that one. So project number 2 was the stool. So again, I'm just applying a light coat to the top of the stool. And then I did the same thing. I added like 2 coats just to the underside that wouldn't be seen, and then I did 3 coats on most of the rest of the stool, and I think there was one or 2 places I ended up doing 4. But here is my black and white plaid paper, and I decide to angle the stool on the paper so that I can get a better fit, and then again just turn the stool upside down and trace it onto the back of my paper. Cut out that oval. Easiest fussy cutting ever. And then once I get this cut out, I will again use my Mod Podge to apply it to the top of my stool. So here I'm showing you the supplies I have. There is my Mod Podge, and it is the matte Mod Podge, and then it's just a regular foam brush. And then I do keep my Mod Podge, I do pour it out into a little tray. You could use a bowl, you could use a cup, whatever you have on hand. We just happen to have these little trays. And so again, I'm putting Mod Podge on the back of my paper, and then I will also apply it to the top of my stool and start kind of pressing it down from the center out. And you didn't notice it as much on the sled, but here you'll see that I do have overhang on the edges, and I am totally fine with that. I would rather have overhang than have part, of the top of the stool showing. And on something like this where it's just slightly rounded, it's really easy just to kind of round over the overhang and kind of glue it down as it curves around the top of the stool. So I will come in with my scissors and trim off a little bit of the excess because I didn't get it on perfectly on the top, and so there were a couple spots where the overhang was a lot longer than everywhere else. So I did want to try and make it look a little more uniform. So I do trim off a little bit in certain spots and then come back in with some more Mod Podge right there on the edges and burnish that down. And I will go ahead and put a light coat of Mod Podge on the top here before I do my distressing, like with the paint. And you don't have to. You could just go ahead and do the distressing and then add the Mod Podge on top of that. But I knew I was going to be doing this in various steps, so I went ahead and added the Mod Podge just to make sure that my paper was going to stay on. And then I come back in and do my distressing with the paint. And so the Mod Podge, when you add it to the back of the paper and the stool, that glues it on, and then this top coat just helps seal it. So here I'm using that black acrylic paint and just adding it onto that vinyl backing there. And I go all around the top of the stool and the bottom of the top, like the bottom edge of the top as well, because I feel like those are some places that would have gotten, banged up or distressed a little bit. And so that's what I'm doing, is kind of like this bottom edge here. And it's definitely easier to do like these sharp edges than it is some of those rounded edges, just because you get a cleaner line on these sharper edges. But I was just, again, trying to think, I'm like, okay, if this tool had been around for a long time and gotten banged up, where would it show somewhere? So once I finish up with the paint, I am going to come in with a sanding block, like once the paint is dry, and sand off a little bit, especially at the top there, just to make it look a little more natural. And I don't mind if there's some natural wood showing as well, because again, it just kind of gives it some layers. And so I showed you sanding a little bit, and then I did the rest of it off camera. And then here I'm applying my final coat of Mod Podge for the stool, and I only did Mod Podge on the top of the stool. I did not Mod Podge the rest of the stool. There really just wasn't a reason. So here I'm applying the polyacrylic to the top of the stool as well, and I did 3 coats of poly on top of the stool just for extra protection, since my kids may end up using it as a stool, who knows. And then here is the stool in our living room by the fireplace with a fun little gnome. So I hope you guys enjoyed these projects. I really had a lot of fun, and I love how they turned out. Thank you for joining me today. If you did like this video, this type of video, please give it a thumbs up so I know for next time. Otherwise, thanks for your time, and I hope you're all having a very crafty day.